So do you think that songwriting is a skill that you kind of can accumulate and build over time, or do you think that it's something that's more inherent in people like you who are naturally songwriters?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of a difficult question. I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call myself that. I think that I'm more of a songwriter than a like a jam player. Um, but I think it's definitely something that, especially depending on the genre that you're working on, it can be progressed as a skill. Um, I don't know. I've definitely noticed in my writing that there's, every album tends to be evolutionary. So I guess that's a testament to that question. But it's something you have to really cultivate. You know what I mean? And that comes from like listening to your influences or just like building on expanding your own well, just your skill set, I guess. No, it's kind of a loaded question, but essentially, yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Some people, I know a lot of guys that are like unbelievable shredders and just really, really inherently good at like mm, the math part of music and in theory and stuff like that, but they really struggle with coming up with song structure. So, I think it's definitely a bit of both.
Yeah, I think songwriting's its own skill aside because musicality and understanding music is a different skill to me than being able to write music. It's like in my mind it's the difference between being someone who knows English really well and someone who writes a book. Those are two different things. So I think that's how I think of music, and I think it's really in any creative realm because I mostly do video and audio and stuff too, and it all really works together. You're either like the person who can make stuff or you're the person who's very technical and you understand how cameras work and how the technical effects of things work, but you have to kind of have some overlap. You can't be a songwriter and then suck at guitar too, especially, in your realm of being in a touring heavy metal band. They have to overlap, but I think songwriting is its own skill that's really important. So when you're writing, do you kind of get into a groove and have these habits of sitting down every single day and having this productive session, or are you kind of a sprint where you get this creative energy and you just have it all come out in one big boom?
It's no, it's quite the opposite of the former. It's my writing is like very sporadic. The core of it really, I mean, at least the way I do it is I have to formulate some kind of a core melody in my head, and it might take like a couple of days, it might take a couple hours, it might take a few weeks to actually get it out exactly how I want it to be, and to either like play it on a keyboard or on a guitar or something like that, and then everything else kind of builds from that. It's kind of like a trickle down effect for the rest of the song. And then sometimes, especially with this new album, I think it's been more of periods of disillusionment than actual creativity because I've probably hit a solid block maybe two or three times trying to finish this album. So it really comes and it goes. I mean, but I personally, I have this thing where like when I do have a creative like burst, I try to juice it as much as I can because I don't know when the next one's gonna be.
Hmm.
I find it kind of difficult to just sit down and jam and write riffs like that. I really have to like think things through thoroughly. So for me, like the revision process is what makes me really sick of these songs, is because I go back and forth hundreds and hundreds of times before I, even finish a quadrant of a song. And then even then I'm still not happy with it. So
Well, it shows in your songwriting too. I mean, your songs are very well structured. They're very well put together. They have their own feeling and their own, like, every song is its own little encapsulated world, and you guys use a lot of atmosphere in Fires in the Distance, and all this stuff is really, you can tell you put a lot of time into it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think there's this, I guess that's what I was getting at with the first question, is there's this illusion that, you know, some people just have it naturally, but it's really a lot of hard work. No matter what you're doing, when it comes out and it's this good product, I mean, you probably put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, if not thousands, into an album. And I know, being in a band and in the past, and being the main songwriter, I would basically just lock myself in a room and I would work on music until I couldn't stand it anymore. And you're very right about these creative bursts. I was just talking to another guy on the podcast where I think as creative people, you get these waves and they come up and down, and you can kind of feel when you kind of run out of steam and juice, and then there's just random upswing where you're hyped and you're just working your ass off and shit just seems to come out of you magically. And I think it's our job as creatives to kind of like learn to ride that wave, because it's not 100% thing that's always there. You can reach sometimes, and you can find some inspiration in weird places, but it's just, to me, it's riding this wave of creativity that comes and goes.
I think you definitely, the more time goes on, the more you are aware, or even hyper aware, of when it's happening. And you're also very aware of the fact that once it's gone, you don't know when it's going to happen again. I mean, but then, like I said, it's very relative too. It's a very personal perspective on things. I'm sure there's plenty of guys that can just sit down and bang out a record, and not even a bad one, in like a couple of weeks. I mean, there's plenty of dudes that are just like riff machines, and that they're just that good. They dedicate, like, that's just how their brain works. You know, there's just plenty of guys that are just like cognitively structured differently. So that's just not my personal experience, but I'm sure it happens. But being like in the place where you and I are, it's just like you definitely recognize that you're riding a certain high, or a certain wave, and you're just like, all right, I got to take advantage of this as much as I can, because there's definitely plenty of times where I haven't had like a creative push in weeks, and I'm just kind of like, all right, I have like a day or two off. I'm just gonna like lock myself in my room, put my headphones on, sit down, and just like focus on this. And then after a couple hours, you got fucking nothing, and you're just pissed off, and you're just like, all right, I just have to put this down and walk away, because whatever I am coming up with right now is not going to be anything that I'm going to want to use anyway, because there's no feeling behind it, there's no emotion behind it. Um, so yeah.
When you get in those, what you would essentially call a creative block, do you do anything in particular to help pull you out of it? Are there any kind of, maybe do you listen to records that you really enjoy, or do you maybe go outside of the realm of the typical genre, or do you maybe do things that aren't musically relevant, maybe art, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is, playing cricket? I don't know what the hell people do.
I listen to a lot of like non-metal atmospheric music. I listen to like a lot of like post rock and stuff like that. With some classical music and things like that. And just like try to absorb a little bit of a flow that might be reminiscent of a direction that I'm trying to go in, and just be like, okay, maybe this could be an interesting idea in the genre that I'm trying to work with, or maybe I can work off of this tangent and go somewhere different. But like sometimes you find little things that could bridge you to that next riff that you were thinking about, but you didn't quite have that bridge in mind, and you were missing that one little bridge. And then once you figure it out, it kind of puts everything together. But definitely not. I don't listen to a lot of like music within my own genre to make those connections. Not so much anymore, at least. The healthiest thing has been honestly to step away from the whole process. But there's only so many times that you can do that before you're starting to feel really unproductive. and it's just like, all right, well, I got to figure something else out because. But I mean, I've had blocks that have lasted like 6 months before, so.
Yeah, is there anything that you do that's conscious in any way to push your writing? Because I know I mean, you guys are going on, is this your third album
Yeah.
with Fires? So you're
Mhm.
going on your third album, and obviously, every album has its own distinct vibe, its own distinct feel, its own distinct way of sounding and what comes out. Do you consciously push the boundaries, or do you just make what feels right? Do you even concern yourself with that?
No, I definitely make there's it's a two-part answer to that. I definitely write what feels right in the moment. And every record has been very, very different in that sense.
Hmm.
But that's okay too, because I mean, you can't help but think like, okay, well, the last one got a pretty good response. If I go in a completely different direction, might lose all those people. But then if you're thinking of it that way, you're never going to really achieve anything that you feel like really good about personally. So, like, I try to maintain some core elements um, between each album. You know what I mean? There's certain things that are not going to go away, but as far as like um, focus on like guitar work or synths or something like that, that definitely varies. Or even like the speed, the drum work, things like that. That's definitely something that ebbs and flows here, and it's not really ever going to be a constant. I'm not really sure where the next one's going to be going into, but I know for a fact this third one is way, way different than the last already. So, um, but you also don't want to stray too far from you know your origins too, because that's what gives their project its own like unique sound. So, and you don't want it to become something else because at that point you might as well just have a splinter project and pick a different name.
Metallica, take note. No, just kidding. But
There's a lot of bands that could do that.
yeah, yeah. Is there any tools that you use as a songwriter that really you think help you out, or do you just put your recording, whatever DAW you use, and just let it rip? I mean, do you have any software? Do you have any non-computer based tools? Because I mean, I'm, as a guy who does media, I'm constantly have so many freaking tools and stuff that I'm messing with. Do you have anything like that for your songwriting?
Yeah, I mean, I usually write um when I don't have a particular melody in mind, I usually write drums first. So I use the Bagram drums. Um and then I have Omnisphere, which I use as a VST for my synth. So, I usually just either sit down with a keyboard or just write a couple of drum ideas and play like something on the piano, like as far as a melody behind it, and maybe then that'll give way to some guitar riffs. Or sometimes it's the other way around, but I definitely like when I can't exactly come up with a riff that I like on guitar, I will go the other route, either start with drums or start with the piano instead. And sometimes like I have like a mini little keyboard app on my phone. Sometimes I'll be at work on like a lunch break or something, and I have something in my head, and I'll record this stupid little MIDI thing. And then by the time I get home, I was like, "Oh, that's what I was thinking about." And I actually put it on a real keyboard and record it into the DAW, and then things progress from there. So, you know,
Yeah, do you find it better to write essentially by yourself? Because that's where I always found I was most comfortable with, because I could flesh out an idea without. I've just never been great at jamming, and that goes with everything. That goes with anything, like making documentaries. That goes with stuff. I just sit down and I make shit, and I flesh out the details later.
I mean, that's always been my process, even with my previous bands and with Fires. I I never write with anybody. I get the demos or like whatever song I'm working on to its most complete state, and then I'll send it out to Craig, my bass player, or Jordan, my drummer, and I'll give them what I have and be like, okay, we're going to be working off of this foundation here. Um, and they're okay with that because I mean they worked with me for so many years at this point. They know that this is the process in this band. I don't really jam. I don't really enjoy jamming too much. Um, I don't know whether it's like an attention thing, but I get really annoyed really quick. Uh, just being in a room where a bunch of people are just like jamming on nothing in particular. Maybe it's because I need something to be like set in stone that we should be working on. But it's just it's a mentality thing. Like jamming doesn't work for me. You know, I want to have this big foundation in place before we can actually proceed to work on it as a group. And that's just something that's been really functional in this project. So we don't really try to mess with anything that's not broken. So
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because I think heavy metal is more close in the process to classical music than it is to any other genre because metal isn't necessarily a jam music. It's not bluegrass. You don't just, it's like, hey guys, we're gonna start riffing in E and everybody just shreds. Metal is very structured, and a lot of times it's funny if you ever seen some of those videos on YouTube, they'll take metal riffs and they'll take metal songs and they'll convert them to classical music and it pretty much just sounds like it. And classical music's basically just written by a guy in a room with a piece of paper and a piano writing everything.
yeah,
So it's very similar, and I think maybe we're similar in the aspect of, you know, we like to create and make the stuff and then we kind of get, I don't want to say stuck, but we get forced to work with other people to make it come out in life and into a full finished product.
it also depends. I mean, there's other genres too. You can look at like thrash and slam and shit like that. And I highly doubt that, you know, for slam death, it's one dude sitting in a locked room with his fucking headphones trying to concoct this piece or whatever.
Yeah.
Which also, you know, sometimes I do get a little bit envious of because it seems like so much fucking fun to like play like filthy shit like that. It just seems really, really liberating in its own way. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It is interesting because the music that you and I basically have been playing our entire lives is very structured, and there's not a lot of room for screwing around and making your own little fun parts. It is what it is, and you play it that way every night. You might be able to mess around on a solo or something, but the song is the song. We're not changing chord structures in the middle of a jam session. So when you are getting to the end of a writing process, I always find that the hardest part because you're constantly wanting to change stuff. And I'm sure now being on a record label and things of that nature, you kind of have to have a hard deadline date to get stuff done. But when do you, as the main songwriter, sit down and say like, this song's done? Because that's always the hardest part because you want to keep changing.
Not until like probably days before we go into the studio, dude. Like it's ever evolving and changing. Like I could think of something on the drive to work tomorrow, you know, that I want to add to
Mm-hmm.
something that's already supposedly finalized. It's it's just never finished. And there's definitely plenty of times where, you know, I'll be listening to a record that's already done, you know, from a couple years ago or something, and be like, damn, I should have played this here, it would have been way better. But
Yeah.
you know, it's just never finished. And it's okay. It never really has to be finished. Um because like if you do have the opportunity to play in a live setting and you're playing some older stuff, then that's the perfect chance to augment it to something that you were thinking of recently. So there's always that little caveat to it.
So do you have any maybe advice for people who are struggling with songwriting that really helps you out? I mean, I know you said you get in these, and we all do, we get in these times where we're not as creative, I guess you could say, or, you know, stuff's not coming to you as naturally. But as a songwriter, you kind of, especially being on a label and being on that cycle of an album so many years, do you have any advice for people to how to just basically get shit done when you're not necessarily feeling like it?
I would say, and this is something that I've struggled with on this third album, um, is to approach one song at a time, and that's how I've always done um songs and albums in general. But for some reason, with this third one, I got to a point where I had 4 or 5 general outlines, and I had so much more work to do on each, and it was almost just overload. It was just like you don't even know where to start, and then you get
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed. You're just like you don't know like which song to even pick to begin to work on, and it's a mess, you know. At least for me. But before, when I would just focus on one track at a time and not move on to a next one until that one was as finished as it could possibly be, that definitely gave me a lot more peace of mind for sure. Um, I know that's not always a possibility, but I think that could definitely smooth things out as far as you know, making the flow much easier in a creative process. Just like
Yeah.
select one piece and then just give it everything you have before. And if you're like thinking of riffs that don't particularly fit that particular piece, don't start working on them like or overly too much until you're finished with the first. Because that's exactly what happened with me. And maybe some people flourish in that kind of like um, in that way, but I definitely didn't. I ended up in a place where I was just way too overwhelmed with way too many loose ends, and it took a long time to actually finalize everything to an extent, to an extent where we could send it out and to um, continue in the pre-production process. But that's, I feel like I dug myself a hole with that one.
I've been there many times, and yes, I think you are onto something with that because that's like just by pure happenstance, that's exactly how I started structuring the documentaries I've been making. Is I have to go in with a semblance of an idea of what I'm looking for, but the people you don't have any control over the answer they're going to give you, so you don't know what's going to come out the other end. All you have is a list of questions, and I basically will dump that project into an editing system, and I will start taking I look at it just like a song. There's chunks, and a documentary to me is almost like I don't view it as like an album, but I view it as like a song. It's one big song, and there's all these chunks within it, and it's my job to figure out how to make them fit together, even though they're not really logically making sense to one another. And I feel like it's the same way with a riff. You have this sweet riff you wrote, or this sweet chorus or melody or whatever you come up with, and then you have maybe another one that you want in this song somewhere, and you have to find this weird, I don't know where it comes from. You have to make them fit together, and sometimes there are parts that don't even seem like they would logically ever fit together, and you just have this moment where they connect and you're like, holy shit, how did I make that happen? And that's like, to me, the magical of the creative process is like, I'm an idiot, I don't know where that came from, but it fucking rules, and that's all I care about. Like, those magical moments make all this stressful bullshit so worth it to me. Just,
Oh
I
yeah, no,
love
when
when
you
it happens.
find that perfect way to transition into that other part that you could just not for the life of you figure out how to connect. It's a very liberating feeling, you know. It's almost like an epiphany. It's just like, all right, perfect. This is amazing. Or on the other side, you can always turn into a prog band and just start switching up time signatures and just make everything fit at the same time. Regardless of making sense. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people do that with everything they work on, and they just say it's avant-garde. I'm like, whatever. Avant-garde is what is just it's just a dumpster for where people don't know what the hell they're talking about and they want to sound cool. I think the in my opinion, the more you do stuff, though, the easier it gets. And now, I mean, this is your third album that you're going into with Fires in the Distance, but you've done multiple albums before that. You're probably on what, album 6 at this point, or 7 even.
I think
So,
6.
do you think that looking back, do you think that it's gotten easier, or have you evolved so to the point where it's getting harder to write these
No,
albums?
kind of both. The thing is, it's getting easier in a sense is that I have much more familiarity with my workstation and all the tools that I use. And I can just like jump into it after like a record's done, and I'm like not writing anything particular for a couple of months. I can always like when I do have something, I can just like open up my DAW and just jump right in. Like I very rarely add anything new to the mix as far as like components that I use or VSTs or plugins or anything. It's mostly the same things that I personally enjoy in that work. So it's like, that's established. The equipment's established. That kind of stuff makes things easier. But of course, like the further you go on, the more you start kind of considering is just like, is there going to be a point in time where I just run out of ideas? You know, I don't think it's very healthy to think about that too much because I'm sure there's going to be a point where you just kind of like I said, just run out of things to write, and you might have to take an even longer break, or you might just decide to write some filler, which I don't believe in, so I probably won't do anything like that. Um, but then again, you have other bands that consistently pump out material that is solid. Um, so it's a relative thing. But personally,
One
yeah, I
of
thought about it for sure. I'm sure, like, considered the fact that a couple of years down the road, like, what directions is this band going to go into? Because it can't be just the same thing, putting out the same record like over and over and over again. So
As you guys have grown as a band, do you find that it's easier from now that you've done some touring and you've had multiple record cycles together, and do you think that it's easier, you guys mesh better, or is there always, I mean, it's just like a job, you're always going to have a little bit of like tug of war because everybody has their own personalities, and especially in the things like you and I do, everybody wants to have a little input. I mean, it goes the same as a job. It goes the same with any creative project. Everyone's going to want, in a multi-person creative project, everybody's going to want to have a say. But do you think that's gotten easier as time goes on because you guys get to know each other, or is it still just the same as always?
no, it's definitely kind of remained the same because we've started out with the understanding of what the process is going to be like, and everybody's okay with it. There's definitely there's points where you know everybody gets a little bit itchy and they want to keep working on stuff when I'm not necessarily ready to proceed further,
Mhm.
and I have to tell them to like give me a little bit, and then I'll be right there before we move on to the next part of the process. But other than that, no, it's fine, and it's all like I always take every all the feedback and all kinds of criticism from my guys, and with open ears, I listen to their considerations and what they're thinking, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work with my vision for a particular song, and I have to explain like, look, this is why I need this part here is because of this particular flow. And we don't have any kind of like ego clashes or anything like that. We just
That's
like
good.
we speak in a civilized manner. We understand, and then when we hear the final product, it's like, oh, okay, I understand now. So
It's always worked best for me too, especially when you come into a band essentially you have to work with them to assign, I guess there's no better way to put it, assign your role. Like in Astroborn, I am the producer. That's my job. I'm not involved in the writing process. I don't touch any instrument while they're in the writing process. They are the musicians. They do their thing. I know how to write. I've written albums. I've done all this stuff, but the band is their sound. It's their vision. I come in at the end and I have to be the bearer of bad news and say, this part sucks. We need to do something here. But they've already had time to flesh out their ideas and they know that that's my role. And I'm there to basically be a barrier between they've run out of ideas. They've been grinding on this album for 8 months and I'm coming at it with fresh eyes and ears saying, this part to me as someone who's never heard this is boring. So what can we do together in the studio to make this more exciting? Like, I'm not saying you have to redo the whole album. I'm just saying like this section, this bridge maybe is a little lackluster. And then, they expect that now. And I think that makes everyone work together. And I'm like the video guy. That's what I do. I make the video stuff. So we're all kind of in our own little area. And like Derek writes. Derek's a writer. He's a shredder. That's his world. I don't bother him when he's writing. I just come in and say, this guitar tone sucks. Let's make it better. That's my job, and I think things work better when you have those understandings, especially in a group setting. And I have to keep myself in check and not pick up a guitar and say, I got a riff idea. Why don't we try this? Like, that's not my role. I can do that in another band if I want to. Know your position and do the best you can in that position. So it works for us. Yeah. It works.
Yeah, like I wouldn't presume to tell Craig what bass tone to use because I don't know shit about bass. So I just leave it to him. He's a professional enough musician to know what will work best in what situation, and he takes care of that. And same thing with Jordan, and his equipment and stuff like that. But it's also very essential to have a producer like you're describing that's coming in with a pair of ears that haven't been completely battered with this music for 8 months. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, all right, like, let me give you some fresh takes on what I'm hearing as an outsider. Not an outsider from the band, but as an outsider from having to have written these things, Because I have the same thing with our producer, Dave Kaminsky, where like there's been plenty of times where I'll show him some things and he'll be very honest about it. It's just like, as somebody that's outside of the writing process here, this doesn't really work to me. I'm like, all right, maybe you're right. You know what I mean? Because I have no clue because I haven't really bounced this off of anybody. So you got to be open to that kind of thing. So it's very fortuitous that they have you to bounce off of like that, because there's plenty of producers out there that are just like, it sounds good to me. If it sounds good to you, click.
Yeah. And that's it's hard as I think this goes for any person who does creative work. It's very difficult, and I still have a problem with this. I've been working on it for a decade to try and be less this way, but I sit here for 8 hours a day cranking on documentaries or YouTube videos or, whatever. I'm writing a book right now. I'm working on all these projects. And then you ask someone for criticism and it's hard to put your ego down and they'll be like, well, this part I don't like. And you in your brain, you're screaming like, fuck you. I spent all the time working on this. What do you know? And then you're like, wait, no, I have no idea if this is good or not because I've been beating on it relentlessly for months and months. This could be dog shit. So it's really hard. Like, I think just because you hold your creative work so close when anybody criticizes it, you just kind of have a natural, I'm not saying you, I'm saying me, I have a natural defense against it. And I have to remind myself that this is for the betterment of the project. And it's really hard to lose that piece, but it's always for the best. And the thing I remind myself is you don't have to take their advice if you truly think it's not going to make the project better. But I've rarely had a time where someone was like, this part really sucks. And I objectively took a step back and looked at it. I'm like, yeah, you're actually right. Like, that does suck, or it's too long or boring. So how do you find yourself dealing with that? Because I think just inherently, I think we all deal with that at some level.
Well, I definitely send material back and forth with Dave consistently as it's getting written. So I don't go too deep into the process with something that, could be much better. And then once we actually, set aside time to get into the studio and record, and um, that's not the time and place to start figuring out, you know, what should be working where. Like when you're in the studio, you should know exactly what goes where. You shouldn't be sitting around trying to figure things out.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a constant back and forth. Um, so by the time we're actually ready to go and hit the record button, like everything's already set in place and it's a smooth and quick process. So it's a continuous open conversation. Yeah.
I think it's for musicians. I think they have this different perspective on the creative process because the studio feels so final and it's very expensive, and that's not something that necessarily equates to like someone who's producing a like if you're making a YouTube video or something, it's basically something that's like throwaway content. It's not, there's no cost to it other than your time, which is, very valuable. But if you screw it up, you're not having to pay some guy an extra $1,000 a day or whatever it is to sit behind the board. So yeah, I think musicians have this extra stress of the studio. Do you guys get stressed in the studio? Because again, it's expensive. You only have a very short window to do the entire album, or do you rehearse enough that it really is not a big issue for you?
We try to get ourselves to the point where we don't feel any stress when we're recording, except for getting the takes perfectly. Um, because there's always anxiety once you start hearing the metronome start counting down, and it's like that K-Mac video. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's so
No.
funny. He's just like all shredding. He's just like, oh, all right, time to record. And he presses the record button. It just like slams his face on the table. And it's exactly what it is, a lot of
Yeah.
the time. So outside of that very natural and human anxiety, we try to eliminate everything else off the table that could be an obstacle and make sure that, once we're actually there, we take up as little time as possible or as much as we need to just for it to sound good, but we're not working out what should be played,
Are
or at
you
least very, very little, you know.
are you guys mix snobs, or do you let the producer do his thing? Or the sound
No, I
engineer,
don't,
I
I
guess.
don't, I don't know anything about, I don't know nearly enough about mixing. It's my knowledge is very basic. So that's all. I leave that ball in his court completely. Um, and obviously like you will send me back like certain mixes and I'll be like, all right, I need this to be a little bit louder, and that's continuous back and forth process until we, settle on something that we all agree on. So
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the stress of the studio because it's like you've spent how many months and potentially years creating this thing, and now you have to print it essentially. And I remember every time we do an album, we record in this room I'm in right now. We just record everything in here. It's my podcast studio. It's our music studio that everybody comes over, and we just hammer it out as best we can. And I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here listening to takes for 10,000 hours of them, and we just talk a bunch of shit. But then Derek and I always do all of the acoustic guitar work on the album, and that's pretty much, we rent a cabin somewhere secluded off in the wilderness and we lock ourselves in there, and I take my recording gear, and mainly because I think we need that peace and tranquility when we're out, like, because acoustics is so stressful. There's no give. There's no room for error. If you flub a note, it's there. There's no hiding it with reverb or gain, and it's just a pain in the ass. And the last album we did, we locked ourselves in a cabin in northern Michigan, and this one stupid song took me 5 hours to get the take right. And I was so stubborn. I wanted to do it all in one take for no reason. I'm an idiot. That's never a good idea. And we finally got it. And I it's one of those things. It's like, it was so challenging that when I was done, I was the happiest I'd been in months, because it's just like, I finally did it. It's not 100% perfect, but I'm glad that I got that out and I was able to physically do it. So do you guys have any studio rituals, or do you basically just go in there and just do your thing? Because I know it's so stressful. It's so stressful.
No, nothing really, man. Just show up fresh and as well rehearsed as you can, and just go, because I feel like overthinking is just really going to be adding supplemental anxiety to something that's already going to be there regardless, just in the air, you know. Because recording is just in the room itself. I feel like anxiety just like lives in the air there. So, so there's no point in adding more to it. It's just one of those things that you just got to rip off the band-aid and just go and work out the kinks from there. Just takes, and as many takes as you need to, because you only get to release it once. And you know, whatever it sounds like is what it's going to sound like forever. That's what you leave behind. So you know, just make sure that it's the best that you can possibly make it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to let go of the project, but once it's done and printed, it's there. It is what it is.
Yeah.
You're always, like you said earlier, you're gonna look back and you're gonna see little flaws and stuff. But in a world where all of this stuff has been, there's this expectation that everything's exactly perfect, and I think of all genres besides maybe pop music, metal is one of the worst with it. Do you find there's any room for organic in metal? Because everything's to a metronome, everything is just dialed in, and it's like all the noise is cut between pauses and all this stuff. It's almost, it becomes the feel, and I'm guilty of this. I mean, I've done this a million times, where it just starts to feel claustrophobic and overly produced. But I mean, your guys' music feels so much looser, and it just feels so much more open and big and not so structured and tight and enclosed. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but do you guys, is that something you do on purpose, or is that just a byproduct of how you write?
No, it's definitely a purposeful thing. I mean, there's definitely some parts that are like tighter in the sense that you're describing them, but they're kind of strewn all over the place. They're not the core focus. Like, for example, like there's a lot of like newer like tech bands where the focus is just all of those crazy riffs, and it's just like all the production's almost plastic to the point where it's so perfect. And it's like, it's, I don't know, like, to me it's not necessarily as enjoyable. And you can take like old school tech bands like Spawn of Possession and shit, and you know, first couple of Aeon records, and those dudes, like, they played like machines, but you could also hear a very organic, like, tone to what they were doing, because there was no like finish to it, that perfect little lacquer to it that a lot of bands use nowadays with production and editing and things like that. It was all much more human. And there's definitely, you can still find some bands that have that same approach, but they're few and far between nowadays. You know, you got to look in other genres for stuff like that.
No, I think there's for me, there's a big movement in my life to try and find more of that organic stuff, and especially with the advent of AI and all AI music and all of these things, it's refreshing to hear stuff that sounds like it was written by a human being. Because I mean, it's just not, as someone who makes things, I want to see stuff that other people made, and I know the process sucks, and I know the process is messy and gross. And if you listen back to any old classic album from, 70s, 80s, even up into the mid 90s, before we had all this shit that we had, like, I could stop what I'm doing right now, open up Ableton Live or something, and put on a drum track and a MIDI guitar tone and a MIDI bass and write a song in 5 minutes if I wanted to. But there's something really awesome to having this organic stuff. And I feel like that's across the board in all creative aspects, whether you're writing, whether you're making video, whether you're whatever, because there's a big movement in the filmmaking world too, where people are talking about how all this shit on Netflix just looks flat and dead. There's no depth to it. They're like afraid to make a dark background that has shadow in it. And it's just like, it's the same thing with music. We're trying to make everything so perfect that it becomes lifeless.
We can make the same correlation to, like, if you're a horror fan, why so many people are such big fans of The Thing, and of movies with practical effects as opposed to like CGI and things like that, because of the amount of effort it took, and also how it looks. It looks like it was more real. You know what I mean? It looks like it was more. Um, I don't know. Like, there's so much more effort that went into it than just anything that's computer generated, which is just, I don't know. It's soulless. There's no feeling behind it. You just type a line in and there you go. That's why I don't believe in even the term AI music. That's not a thing. It's just it's a bunch of code. You know what I mean? It's just like, what is
Yeah.
that? It's so I
It's a
hear it.
computer.
I can definitely, like, there people can do some funny shit with it, for sure. But to have the balls to try to call yourself an AI musician, I mean, that's a new level of delusion I think can only exist in 2025. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, I know what you mean. 100%. I know what you mean. Do you have any stuff outside of music that you enjoy? Because I know I'm very much, when I get into something, I'm into it like 2 billion trillion thousand million percent. I mean, whether it's video production or fishing or music, when I'm in 100%. And I don't really necessarily allow myself a lot of like hobbies. Like, I don't play video games. I don't have a lot of the normal hobbies. I just now recently started like watching movies on TV and like watching old movies and going on Netflix and watching new stuff. For years I didn't watch a single thing. And I don't know if it was some like bullshit in my head of like, I don't know. I don't even know what I was thinking. Maybe it's just like I'm above all this new crap or some bullshit, but I still can't pull myself out of. I'm watching it and I'm like trying to take away filmmaking techniques and videography skills and lighting stuff. And I don't have that chill button. I'm always doing a thing. And I've been trying to teach myself to find some sort of hobby that doesn't involve me making shit or having to think about it at some deep level on every aspect. And do you have a thing like that, or are you just like, you just do music and that's your life?
I mean, the thing, I mean, I love movies. I love horror movies. I'm a huge
Mm-hmm.
fan of that. Like, between work and writing, like, if I have, spare time, I'll throw on like some horror films and stuff like that. Um, but I've definitely also found myself in the last few years that I am not really practicing as much as I'm playing. There's a vast difference in between the two, and like
Mm-hmm.
I know I need to find the time and make the effort to actually practice and expand my skill set on
Mm-hmm.
guitar a lot more than where it is now. If not for anything, just for myself. That that's definitely is gone by the wayside. Just trying to balance, full-time job and a full-time, music career too. It's like it's a fine, like, tightrope to walk, and it's kind of hard to allocate the time to consistently practice and improve your skills, because I think that they'll definitely go a lot farther than just like continuing forward with like future records with just where I am now. Um, So I guess that would be my next focus. Uh, but yeah, when it's not that, it's just horror movies.
No, I mean that's totally fine. And yeah, practicing, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like when you've been doing it so long, it almost feels redundant to practice, but you're also never going to like break through into a new way of thinking about music if you are always playing the same thing. And I've been there a million times. Like when I got real stuck with my guitar playing, because you know probably more than anyone just how it is. You have certain way of playing that you play, and you have certain, you always reach for this one note, or you always reach for this one chord progression, or you always do this same weird chord that's just like your thing that you always do. You catch yourself in these ruts. And I just picked up a guitar and I started learning, they call it Travis picking it's like a bluegrass or like an old country style of picking, and it completely changed the way I looked at the guitar. And then it just like broke me out of this weird cycle of just playing the same freaking chord progression with the same style of riff over it. And I think it's fun every once in a while to do something like that. I'll do that with video too. I make the same documentary or YouTube video 20 times and I'm like, go make something stupid. Just go film something that you would never make ever. Like a short film about bugs or something. I don't know, whatever bullshit comes into my head. And it really makes you think outside the box. And I think that's a fun tool I keep in my toolkit, is just blow it up and try something that's really difficult that you don't really think you would ever be able to do. Like Travis picking is really difficult, but then you learn it and you're like, holy shit, this is like an entirely brand new way of thinking about things. So do you ever do any stuff like that, or learn, maybe I used to learn songs that were really hard in metal that were different, or stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely essential. That's how I learned to play guitar to begin with, is learning songs that I really enjoyed. Like when I first picked up the guitar, it was just like some Nevermore stuff, or just like whatever, like In Flames, or like Bodum songs that I would play as best as I could, which was like atrocious, but it was still like it was still teaching me things that I was really enjoying hearing, and it was opening up my like my 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 world to something that, a direction that I really was interested in going to, as opposed to just like playing fucking AC/DC covers like my guitar teacher wanted me to. So I mean, I definitely think a lot about, even at this point in the game, about going back and like learning, because there's so many like tabs you can find nowadays of literally
Mm-hmm.
anything. It's just like picking up fucking like a Scar Symmetry song or something like that, and just learning it for fun, and trying to pick apart a Perry Nielsen solo or some shit like that, which I
Good
definitely
luck.
wouldn't be able to play, but at least
Have
not
fun with
like
that.
75% speed, maybe. But still, even that could you know uh, could be beneficial. So um, yeah, it's just a matter of actually finding the time to do that. I think
Mm-hmm.
once this record's finished, it's going to be a little bit easier. Or not. Who knows? It'll be
Is there
harder.
any is there anything you're excited about on the new record? I mean, I know you're still deep in the annals of writing and doing, but is there any kind of stuff you've come across that really gets you excited?
Yeah, yeah. I'm very excited. Like I'm in this stage right now where I'm working with Randy Slaw again on orchestrations, and he's reviewing the record, and he's putting his own input into it as far as synths and piano and um, vocalizations and strings and stuff like that. So I'm very excited to hear that. I think that's definitely going to be a boost for me to get that feedback. And it's also it's a way heavier record uh, than the last
That's good
one.
to hear.
It's a little it still has those melancholy slow parts, but it's at a faster pace. Not significantly faster, but it's definitely more intense. Um, and yeah, it's definitely going to be an evolutionary step for sure. So
Cool.
I'm
Well,
excited about that because it's a new direction we've never really played stuff quite this heavy or at this particular speed before. And like I said, it's important to point out that there's still the traditional do me like slower pieces in it, so that's not going anywhere. But there's some new stuff that's it's exciting territory to venture into. So
Is there any particular projects that you've worked on, past, present, that maybe you're most proud of? Because I mean, 6 albums is a big deal, and you've been in bands like probably most of your teenage to adult life just playing music, and it's something you're obviously very passionate about. Is there any like even a standout song or standout record that really you're like, this is one of the best things I've ever done?
I think in our previous band, in our Archaic Decapitator, on our last EP, which was called The Apothecary, there's a song called Skyward, which I was really happy with. Um, it was pretty much a culmination of like everything that I've wanted to do with melodic death metal in the sense like the fast melodic death metal, the blast beats and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Things that I haven't really like delved too much into since that EP. But I think it's that was an EP that I walked away from being fully satisfied with what was on it as far as composition and um just the songs just felt like everything that I wanted to accomplish since I started. Um and with this band, I don't know. This band is ongoing. That band is finished, but this one is still an ongoing thing. So, it's hard to say. Um Maybe there will be something on this album.
Hey,
Not to say that
never.
I definitely enjoyed the last two for sure, but yeah, it's hard to shift focus from something new that you're working on all the time.
Well, I guess the last question I have here for you is, what do you hope that your music will contribute beyond just entertaining people? Is there anything that you really want people to get out of it, or do you just not, you don't even give a shit? Are you doing it because it's really something you're passionate about, or do you hope that maybe people get a bigger sense of something that you're trying to put out into the world out of your music?
I mean, I'd say it's both. I'm doing this for myself. I think it's very therapeutic to write and create. And I'm also channeling a lot of things that I struggle with personally through the lyrics. And I've had a lot of fans come up and say that it's helped them personally to read these certain things and relate them to themselves because, like I've said before, I try to write lyrics very open-endedly. There's nothing specific in them. It's just very vague, but also very specific at the same time. I just hope that's something that's remains a trend to at least somebody out there. As long as it helps someone and makes them feel better about themselves or just about coping with something, because a lot of it does have to do with you know mental illness and depression and things like that. As long as somebody can tap into it on one level or another and identify with it and find some kind of solace in it, then that's all that really matters to me.
No, that's awesome, man. That's I think that's one of the best tools, and I wish everybody could create some piece of something, whether it's traditional like drawing, painting, art, or music, or writing, or video, or whatever. I really wish everyone could pick up some sort of practice, because it's a way of externalizing a lot of this bullshit that we all deal with on some level on our day-to-day lives. And I think it's a good way to get it out of you instead of just leaving it in there, because you're always dealing with it, whether it's depression, anxiety, whatever. I mean, I deal with a ton of anxiety, and I think being able to put my nervous energy into these projects gives me somewhere to focus it instead of just being in my head and freaking out about shit that's never going to happen and dumb shit that's like insanely irrelevant to anything that's going on. I can sit here and pour that energy into a documentary or a video or whatever. And it really is a cool channel. And I think that's one of the best things about art. So unless you have anything to say on that, we can wrap up here.
No, just to coattail off of that, I think it's probably the healthiest way that I can think of to externalize what you sometimes you can't find the words for. I think that's what a lot of people really struggle with as far as communication, whether it be in relationships or friends or even in therapy or whatever medium you want to look at, is that sometimes it's almost impossible to find the correct words or terminology for what it is you're trying to convey. And I think music is something that creates a perfect channel for it. At least for me, and then other forms of art as well. So I really hope more people would utilize it instead of internalizing as much as they do, especially in today's age.
Or turning to I've seen a lot of people turn to heavy drinking or alcohol abuse or drug abuse, and there's nothing wrong with having a little fun, but when that becomes the coping mechanism, it can be really bad for people. And I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. So art has been such a life-saving thing for me, and it's been so much more helpful than a lot of other things that I could be doing that are terrible for my health. So where can people listen to Fires in the Distance? Where can they buy your merchandise? I know you guys have web stores, and streaming is the main thing nowadays, but I'm sure it would behoove people to buy physical things from you because you get more money from that.
Yeah, all of our physical stuff you can get from our Bandcamp site. Prosthetic handles all of that. And it's streaming on all platforms. Spotify. I don't personally use Spotify, but I know it's on there. It's all over YouTube. And you yourself have helped us film a video or two.
Yeah.
Yep. So grateful for that. That's all up there. So yeah, but as far as merchandise, it's all on Bandcamp, Fires in the Distance. So.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that stuff on the YouTube video, and I'll put a link in the show notes for people to find it, because you guys are one of the first bands that really talked to us and Astroborn when we started on the label at the same time. You guys kept going; they dropped our asses, so we're no longer label mates, but
I wasn't very happy about that.
I mean, hey man, it's got to make money for them, but there's no hard feelings. It's part of what happens in the industry. You can't have a golden ride forever, so it's fun while it lasted.
But I'm grateful to still have talk to you and Jason and Derek, and I just saw Jason at Decapitated a couple of weeks ago. It was great to hang out with him. And we'll be working on videos together in the future, so we'll put you in the saddle for that as well.
All right, man. I appreciate it.